Hi everyone, I'm Zoya Yunus,
And I'm Nesta Bora.
and we are the co-founders and hosts of the Synapse Podcast.
Today we're so excited to be joined by Thivya, the founder and CEO of CapitalHER.
So, CapitalHER is an organization that empowers young women through entrepreneurship, leadership, and hands-on learning opportunities.
Thivya, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Today was a really busy day, but the weather is nice. We'll definitely be going outside, but I'm so excited to be joining this podcast. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. So, to kick things off, why don't you give us an introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Amazing. Thank you so much, Zoya. Hi, everyone. My name is Thivya Jeyapalan. I am the founder and CEO of CapitalHER. I'm also a rising sophomore at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'm studying economics at the Wharton School. I think the most important things that you should know about me is I'm an entrepreneur. I've always been an entrepreneur, I feel, in some form or way. I love being creative, and I think entrepreneurship is the perfect intersection between applying all the amazing business concepts I learned throughout high school that made me fall in love with the topic of economics that I wanted to study, alongside everything that I do that's artistic and creative. I'm a classically trained pianist, and I love playing piano as kind of like my de-stressor whenever I'm stressed out by like my day-to-day routines. In terms of other things that I've been involved in, I used to serve as the national president of FBLA Canada, which is the largest student-run business organization in our country. And that was such an amazing experience being able to work there. And it's definitely what inspired like my journey to run CapitalHER, which I've been doing now for almost 3 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So, before we jump into the questions, I just wanted to say that me and Nessa were so impressed by everything that you built with CapitalHER, and it's really cool to see how many opportunities you have created and how you have a virtual and in-person program. So, to take you back to the beginning, what inspired you to start CapitalHER?
Yeah, for sure. I think I've always just been really, really empowered by my female friendships, whether that's in high school or even like my childhood. I would say like my friends that are girls have always supported my ambitions. But one thing that would sometimes make me sad is the lack of confidence I would see that I didn't necessarily see with my male peers. And this kind of scaled larger as I got to, see more students through my roles at FBLA Canada. I noticed that a lot of girls were interested in finance events and entrepreneurial events, but the actual rates of participation were quite low in ratio. So that really made me think about like what sorts of core issues could lead to these lower rates of participation. And I think a big reason for that is maybe not having enough training in the middle school era. So I think for me, especially teaching piano, I had a lot of exposure to middle school students as well when I was in high school. And I started to realize that, there's not a lot of formal curriculum in school that teaches young girls about financial literacy. And of course, there's other amazing nonprofits and organizations that do this, but they weren't local to my region. So I wanted to kind of start small by creating a tiny like program that we would do over the summer. And then that scaled to become CapitalHER. And we were recognized by so many amazing institutions that sent over their girls. And we've had such great school partnerships. So I think the biggest inspiration for me was seeing a lot of the passions I had, which was, of course, like finance and entrepreneurial events, especially these business competitions, and trying to really be curious and understand like what could increase rates of participation.
Yeah, I love that you saw the problem of participation rates being low and then took the initiative to solve that. And CapitalHER is so big now, and you guys have created such a big impact on so many different people. And I love that a lot.
Yeah, so relating to your journey with CapitalHER, I think one of our biggest curiosities is kind of the trials and tribulations you faced with growing it. So we wanted to ask, what was one of the biggest challenges you faced when creating CapitalHER?
Yeah, I think one of the big ones for me was making sure that curriculum was culturally sensitive. What I mean by that is when you're working with immigrant communities, for example, I'm not born in Canada, I was born in Sri Lanka, and then I moved with my family when I was very young. So concepts of saving, budgeting, things like this were not necessarily new to me. They were new to me, they were foreign to me. So being able to create curriculum that doesn't make assumptions that people have previous knowledge was really big, really taking that beginner's mindset and like applying that to a lot of the content I was teaching. And at the same time, trying to think of different ways to make the content engaging. People, of course, young people have very short attention spans. So trying to find ways to gamify it or get them to be more interactive and engaged with our sessions. That was a huge game changer, I think, for being able to deliver the content. And of course, last part was making it practical. I think there's a lot of great financial literacy knowledge that's in textbooks or YouTube videos, but they're not necessarily applicable to students' lives. Like, how do you actually find a job in the first place before you teach someone about budgeting? And also, like, you have to consider facts like inflation or like where people specifically live, actual costs like commute, transport. These are things that affect us on the day to day, but they're not necessarily incorporated into our curriculum. So I think being mindful of that was a really big trial and like trying to figure out the types of curriculum that stick best with our participants.
Yeah, with what you said, there's something that really stuck out to me was you were making it kind of more beginner friendly than like challenging for girls. Like, was your goal more to like target the people that don't know a lot about financial literacy or to challenge the people that kind of already have that sense of?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think back to year one, and I would definitely think our mindset back then was just to get beginners in the room. But now we have such great ways to filter for previous existing knowledge. We have tests that girls do at the beginning. It's not to shame them or anything like that. It's to place them into different levels so that the content that we're delivering to them is actually worthwhile their time. And I think that's been really helpful because now we don't discriminate based on how much knowledge you have. Even if you have a lot of knowledge, I'm sure there's
Yeah.
something that you can learn through the program.
Yeah, I think that's a great solution to that.
Yeah. Okay. So many students dream of going to schools like Wharton, but it's hard to know what actually matters. So, looking back on your high school experience and years, what are some things that you think made your application stand out beyond just grades?
Yeah, I'll give you a very popular take and then maybe I'll give you an unpopular take. So, my popular take is this. I think that the advice people say be genuine is actually really, really valid. The reason I say this is a lot of these universities are looking for in depth commitment and commitment that you're actually passionate about. So for me, it's pretty obvious that CapitalHER and also like business related extracurriculars were things I was genuinely passionate about because now that I'm in college, I still pursue them. And I noticed that sometimes there's like a big drop off, like kids do things in high school and then like the second they get into university, they stop doing them. But I genuinely do believe a lot of my peers at Wharton continue to get involved and stay involved with community service activities that they did in high school because it actually really, really mattered to them. So that's my first take. You're going to have to spend a lot of time doing your extracurriculars. So please pick something that you're actually passionate about and that speaks to you and maybe what you want to do with your future career. So in my case, it is being an actual entrepreneur. So I like teaching other girls how to, put themselves in positions to be entrepreneurs themselves. And then my second unpopular take is this. It kind of contradicts everything that I just said. If you don't know what you're passionate about, you should just do things that are closest to you in terms of accessibility. Now, what do I mean by that? Start off with clubs at your high school. Those are obviously like very, very available to people in abundance. So if you're in grade 9 and 10, try a bunch of those out, see which ones stick with you. And then another thing I would say is like maybe look online and see what other people have done. I think that was really, really helpful. And some people say it's not that organic or genuine, but in today's world where like you can just go on LinkedIn and find a bunch of people that go to a school or a part of a program you like, kind of looking through other people's profiles might inspire something of your own. I personally didn't do this because I fell into the first category where I knew exactly what I was passionate about, but that would be my advice for anybody that can't find that yet. And then even if something looks super unattainable when you're looking at their profile, try to break it down into like the very, very first steps. So for example, if you've seen somebody that created such an amazing environmental nonprofit where they've like recycled over like 100 tons of paper or something like that, think about the first step. Well, maybe I should understand what the benefits of doing something like this would look like and then go to logistics and things like that. And my last tip to kind of sum that all up is ask for help. Maybe I know a lot of people say to go coffee chat others, but there's also so much help on the internet. You can use AI, you can put in people's extracurriculars and profiles and ask ChatGPT, like, what is the first step to do something like this? And I don't have access to $100,000 in funding. So how do I do this with $100? And you'll get so many great solutions using AI.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree. Extracurriculars are super important, especially doing something that interests you. and continuing that on, not just like doing it in high school for university and stopping once you get there. So when I look at everything that you've been involved with, like Wharton, CapitalHER, FBL Canada, the G20 Youth Delegation, and so many other amazing opportunities, I honestly wonder, like, where do you find all of these opportunities? And when you do, how do you decide which ones are actually worth pursuing while still balancing school and everything else?
And like, I'm going to be very transparent with you. That's still something I'm working on. I feel like sometimes I'll apply to different things, especially when I was in high school, and I wouldn't necessarily know why I was applying to them. I just thought like, okay, why would I waste this opportunity? But now that I'm in college where your time actually does get very, very tight, I've been a lot more mindful with what I'm investing my time into, whether that be clubs or different opportunities, even like traveling, especially when school's going on. So my best advice is for finding things. You can do what I just previously mentioned. You can look on other people's profiles and see, oh, that's a really cool opportunity that they were a part of. And, it's worth a shot just to hit them up with like a LinkedIn DM, and don't necessarily ask for a call right away because people can be very, very busy. But maybe just a quick question asking them like, oh, hey, like I saw this opportunity. Like, when does the like deadline open up for this? And they might just be able to share that with you. And that's already really helpful. And the second thing I would say is like, once you find an opportunity, write it down onto a calendar so you don't forget to apply. That's a huge one. Like, I know a lot of my friends, they put down a bunch of scholarships and like research positions, they're pre-med, and they just forget to apply. So I think a calendar method is super useful, or like setting up a notification a week before to prepare your applications. And then the second part, which is choosing what is actually worth it for you. Set down goals for every year. So for example, this year I just finished up my first year at Penn. So I can maybe not share my 2026 goal, but my 2025 goal. 2025, I just wanted a really smooth transition to college. I finished high school, so I want to go to university and like really take some time for self-care and like exploring things. So I set up a goal to do a bunch of clubs, and I think that was really successful for me because my goal again was exploration. So I was okay with doing more things, but then I set a caveat for that, which was at the end of the year, I need to cut down on at least 3 things so that I'm not like over bearing like myself or anything like that. But I would say that's my best goal. Put a goal for the year and then just do things that fall under that.
Yeah, I think that's really impactful because I think like a lot of ambitious students or like people that I know that want to do a lot of things, they kind of overschedule themselves and it ends up being too much, and then like their success in everything kind of goes down marginally. So I'm kind of wondering like how did you have any strategies to specifically like pick and choose what you thought was worth it, or did you kind of just go off based off your like intuition?
Wait, that's a really good question. I think for me, I'm going to be honest, in high school, I didn't have a very good judgment of this. I think more so I was excited by these opportunities. And especially because I went to public school, I wanted to take advantage of everything outside of the realm of my school because I knew like it's hard to find these opportunities. So if I was handed them, I wanted to take them. And I don't think that's a bad mindset at all, especially when you are coming from public school where it's a little bit harder to find these opportunities inside of your school. But for example, now where I'm at Wharton and the opportunities are such high quality and so many of them, I become like a lot more stingy about what I'm spending my time towards. And my framework is basically like, I'll put like a pro con list and I'll write down like, okay, like pro of joining this is I'll meet more people. Con of doing this is it's going to make me like spend less time on this class that I really want to spend more time doing my readings for. And then what I'll do is I'll compare it to other activities that I'm already doing. And if I'm already making a lot of friends through, for example, one of my consulting clubs, then I won't necessarily find it necessary to pursue something new. So really figure out what is like the unique value proposition of an extracurricular and does it really like deserve your time. But in high school, scratch everything I said. I think it's like a lot better to take advantage of like different opportunities, especially if you come from like similar scenarios as me where you're coming from public school.
Yeah, I wanted to note how it's so interesting how you take like an entrepreneurial mindset towards these things, because like thinking of like the unique value proposition of each club is very business-like, and I think that's so interesting to kind of integrate that into what you're doing with your academics. But going back to your opportunities and the things you did in high school, could you tell us a little bit about your Key of Sight initiative?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm happy to share more. So one of the biggest groups that I'm still involved with is Ingenious Plus. They're an innovation competition across Canada, and I love the staff there. I've come back a few times to speak, do other events, competitions, stuff like that. And they really, really empower young people to work on social entrepreneurial projects. And I would say the Kiev site was my first ever or one of the first social entrepreneurial projects I did that got a lot of traction and really helped me realize that I enjoy creating things. How it started was super organic. As I told you, I'm very, very passionate about music. I've been playing piano like my whole life. And then I told you I was teaching middle school students. And then one day I had a visually impaired middle school student come in. And my family immigrated to Canada near the end of the Sri Lankan Civil War. So there was a lot of different incidents that led to a big population of my family becoming visually impaired, whether that was like pollution related incidents or violence related incidents. And I know my grandfather was visually impaired as well. So I actually studied Braille for a few years and I dedicated myself to doing it. And then I wanted to apply that to teaching music so I could help out that one student that I had that was visually impaired. So it was kind of like a group project. I worked with the parents, I worked with the student, I piloted a new tactile project. And then I actually got to go to Sri Lanka using all the amazing funding that I got through like these different competitions to pilot my program at a school for visually impaired youth. And then I wrote like a research paper on it to get more schools funding to implement like my innovation.
In terms of funding, did you get success in that? Like, were you able to reach your goals in terms of funding?
Yeah, I raised like over $3,000 for the actual music school that I worked in Sri Lanka. As for other music schools in Sri Lanka, I think it was hard to get more funding, but I was still able to get a lot of funding from like my own organization to be able to teach them virtually. So I feel like it was a win-win. And over time, I realized that there was other interests I had. So I naturally transitioned away from the project, but I still like made sure all the teachers had the infrastructure so it could keep going without me having to be there.
Yeah, I think that's so great. For another question, I think with all these things that you were doing and you're still kind of doing in the present day, how do you cope with, I think, the stress that a lot of students are kind of feeling when balancing all these extracurriculars with their kind of academic goals? Like, I know Wharton is probably very academically strenuous as well.
Yeah. So in high school, I did IB, which I think really did help me a lot. Contrary to what some people might say, I think the program was great, but also because of the people that I did it with, they're still some of my closest friends today. And we kind of trauma bonded over a lot of like the shared experiences. And I think more than anything, it taught me time management and it taught me how to study less, but still study with focus. So that's kind of like the same philosophy I take. So whenever I do my studying at Wharton, I'll block out certain time periods where I don't check my email. I don't do anything. I only sit there and I study. And I also study with other peers that are motivated and maybe actually know more about the subject area than me. For example, when I was taking like my advanced calculus class my first year, I have considered myself to be a math person, but there's people at Penn that are like majoring in math or like minoring in math. So they're obviously have a little bit more passion for the subject. So I'll sit and study with them and they'll sometimes teach me tricks or different methods that will help me like do problems quicker, help me like prepare better for my exams. So that's always really, really motivating. And then I think in terms of the stress, I try not to put too much stress to myself and I try not to associate like my self-worth with like any outcomes of any projects I do. Like I could do a project and it can completely flop or people could say the project is like not that great, but I wouldn't necessarily care because I think the project itself, like at least I'm doing something with my time. I really value that. Like every minute of my day, like I'm just excited to pursue different things. So I think that helps me not be stressed because I'm like, oh, I'm really lucky like to be able to like do all of these things. So that mindset has been very great. Also, like I think talks like this, like talking to you guys or like talking to other stakeholders that like for example, Zoya works at CapitalHER. So just being able to like speak about this and like knowing that like my work is also getting other people involved is super inspiring. So I try to set up a few of those calls throughout the week to keep me going. Like, for example, if I'm doing work with the Kiev site when I was in high school, I would set up a few calls with the beneficiaries to talk about the experience. And oftentimes they'll tell me like, oh, this was really helpful for me. And it kind of is motivating because like you have that positivity in your life, even when maybe things on the back end are not going that great.
Yeah, I think that talking to people is so important as well as like studying or working with people who are also like as motivated as you. Like I know
Yeah.
so we're in the same geography class and we would always like study together for geography tests because we both knew that we both wanted to do well in the class.
Wait, very valid. Only thing is like maybe don't talk with too close of a friend because I feel like if I go to the library with certain friends, like there's no chance we're doing any studying.
That's true. So you've had the chance to learn from so many different and incredible mentors and leaders throughout your journey. So what's one lesson that you learned from someone that really stuck out to you and stayed with you?
Yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier in my intro, but I probably should have. I'm a really big mental health advocate. Like I did a lot of work related to that, especially in like my earlier years of high school and especially my family's history and background coming from the place I did. So biggest pieces of advice I've ever gotten from mentors are not necessarily career related, but more so mental health and like physical health related. I'm a big advocate and believer that help should come first because like we have kind of like a responsibility to take care of ourselves, especially in such a busy world. So one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten for mental health is I don't know if you guys can relate, but I'm a huge overthinker. I overthink a lot of things when it comes to like my academics, my future, my work. So I try to do two things that my mentor gave me. One of them is if you're going to overthink, try to overthink the positive, not the negative. And I found that mindset shift to be super, super useful. Like I would used to sit like at my desk and be like, oh my gosh, I'm actually going to fail this exam. Like I've literally not studied enough or anything like that. But then I started to overthink in the positive way, which is like, wow, I've like already done all of this work. Like I've already spent this much time. Like this is just going to go great. And I think like having really good internal dialogue with yourself will change the way you view yourself, but also view like the outcomes of your life. It also makes you a lot less worried about like negative things. But at the same time, another really good piece of advice I've gotten is well, this is just a general quote, but I like my parents preach this, I preach this, which is that luck is when success meets preparation. Sorry, I might have messed that up. Well, basically, what I was trying to say there is like when you have luck, you're basically staying prepared for an opportunity. Sorry, so it's opportunity meets preparation. And that's been really, really useful for me as well. Like trying to think about the small steps that help you achieve big goals is super good. And try not to worry too much about like what the results are going to be, like rather like what the everyday things you have to do are. So if I go back to the exam example, like okay, like this exam's out of my control, I have to go and write this exam. I might as well try every single day to do at least a few problems, and by the end of it, like I'll have no regrets because I've done everything I need to do to prepare myself for the exam.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, overthinking is so real. Like, I also overthink. And I think that's a great quote that you shared as well about the luck and about the small steps. So, to end off
Yes.
this podcast, a lot of our listeners have ideas for nonprofits, businesses, or different passion projects, but they don't know where to actually begin. So, based on everything you've built and the people that you've met, what's one final piece of advice that you would give to a student that's ready to take the first step into building something of their own?
Okay, well, I'll shamelessly plug in CapitalHER. I think that's a really great first step, especially if you're a female identifying student. We have a lot of amazing mentors that come back and talk about their passion projects, and they'll walk you through all the steps to get to where you need to be. And we also provide like all the resources as well. So that's a good step. Likewise, I would say like another really big thing is like to have like some level of effort that you do every single day. Like it doesn't have to be a lot of effort, but I think a lot of students get stuck in the ideation phase, but they never get to like actually executing anything. So don't overthink this because overthinking is going to kill your execution and complexity always kills your execution. So keep it simple always. What I mean by that, go again, use AI, things like that. Put your idea in and tell it, what is the first step I can literally do right now? And then it'll give you a step and just go and do it. Like maybe put on a TV show if you really need like some extra motivation, like put on a TV show, put on something else, and then just lock your head in and like do your work, and at the same time try to like make sure you're choosing something again that you feel really passionate about because it's not going to feel like work. And that's a huge thing for me with CapitalHER. Like obviously nobody loves administrative things that you have to do as an executive director, but for me like teaching every Saturday is like literally my happiness. Like I love hanging out with the girls, like teaching them, and it doesn't really feel like work for me, and I love the people I work with. So same thing here. And last step that I think is very underrated, and I actually never did this, but I am starting to do this a lot more now in university, especially with actual businesses. Find a co-founder, find somebody that will do it with you because they can keep you super motivated and you guys can hold each other accountable, especially when you're doing larger, bigger projects that require a lot of work. It's nice to have someone there supporting you. So that would also be another piece of advice I have.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I feel like AI is super useful. And although people say it's bad, I think it can be useful. And just putting in a tiny amount of effort every single day, like that helps. And the execution process is probably the hardest, but like
It
just
is.
in that little part of effort, then that will help you get things going. So thank you so much for joining us today. I know we had like so many different problems about the time and everything and like the day, but I'm so happy that we finally got to do the podcast, and thank you so much for being here.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much, the both of you, for having me on, and congrats on all the success you've had so far. I'm excited to listen to this episode and all the other episodes you guys create.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Wait, quick question. Do you guys